The moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch, and it's time once again to play the game of how much money does a film need to break even. This game kind of comes up whenever there's a movie that's fairly high budget, has become part of the culture wars, and that movie this time is Indiana Jones 5, Dial of Destiny. The name Dial of Destiny, it's just, I don't know. I would think about Raiders of the Lost Ark, okay, iconic. Temple of Doom, okay. The Last Crusade, or the Last Crusade. Okay, good. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. All right, that one started to get a little lamer. Dial of Destiny. I don't know. I understand he's going to time travel and all that kind of stuff, but all the same, I'm not. I don't love it. It's funny. I have lots of problems with this movie. They're not the same problems other people have. I think. Actually, I suspect more of you probably feel way like name dumb. Movie not necessary. Harrison Ford too old. We don't just go ahead and do what Hollywood's supposed to do at this stage of a franchise and reboot, recast. Get that nice Latinx transgender character there who can be Indy as you do, and everything will be fine. No, but lots of issues. But anyway, they have a good villain. I credit him for that. Anyway. The question has come up of how much money does this movie need to break even? Now, the movie itself has basically it's being reported everywhere from 280 million to 360 million in production costs. Hollywood Reporter is reporting more of the latter. Disney is reporting more of the former. Pardon me. And why? Well, first of all, why that discrepancy? Well, a handful of reasons. One, the original production studio tends to not like just putting out there these films are hugely ballooned in terms of money. But also, Hollywood Reporter doesn't tend to count the whole, Germany and other overseas tax credits the same way that the production company does. And Kathleen Kennedy, for whatever, people say about her, and they say a lot, Kathleen Kennedy is good at this. I mean, and when I say good at this, I mean figuring out where money is hidden to go get, particularly money where you get it for free, or you get it as loans, or you get it as highly discounted debt, or these other things. It's what a lot of a producer does. I think that people have this idea in their heads of Kathleen Kennedy like sitting around a writer's desk going, let's figure out how we make this character gayer or more female or both. And in reality, the producer job typically stays very away from the whole creative writer desk. That's not what a producer does. A producer is about the logistics. It's a financial project manager. It's a horrible actually description of a producer. But anyway, it's a job that typically is very away from creative. Now, that's not to say Kathleen Kennedy isn't as the kind of the prime producer here isn't giving notes. But if you look across her kind of wide assortment of movies, the one thing they seem to have in common is that they all had some level of financial budget success. Not all, people point out Solo, but keep in mind there's like 20, 30 other movies in there. And she tends to know where to go find the money. She's good at that. And Spielberg says, there's this hilarious story where Spielberg's talking about how she would kind of early days sit around in meetings. And then she would he would ask her opinion on something, and she'd have no idea what they were talking about. Like, well, maybe we should put in monkeys. And it's like, ma'am, this is a 1920s prohibition biopic. What do you mean monkeys? Anyway, it just makes no sense. But he would say, she's good at finding the cash. Okay, if you have a producer in a job, you typically do want somebody who's good at finding cash. But anyway, that movie has, let's just say for the sake of argument, it is that 350 million kind of range. Basically, what's it got to make to break even? So a long time ago, in internet years, I don't know, 10 years ago, a Hollywood insider, somebody who was a producer, posted a blog that basically took the science of how much a movie has to make and came up with this just general rule of thumb. And the rule of thumb is, 3x production. 3 times. Now, a lot of people then took it and ran with it. They said, this is it. This is what movies need to make, 3 times production. And that's why you've got people out there right now saying Indiana Jones needs to make $1 billion or $1.2 billion in order to break even. And the answer is that blog article is not remotely accurate, and it didn't take into account a number of different things. I mean, you go down the list. Or, what's wrong with that assessment? Well, number one, it's a sliding curve, meaning if a movie is more unknown, meaning they have, the company that's doing it, the actors, the property involved is lesser known, they typically do more marketing. Proven, by the way. Whereas a bigger budget film like a Star Wars, an Indiana Jones, or a Marvel movie, not only does less marketing because they don't have to, they have people who pay them to basically license or market the product. So if you're McDonald's and you're doing a Happy Meal promotion for the Mario movie, you're paying for that license. The production studio isn't paying for you, and then you in turn go out and you advertise the fact that you've got Mario Happy Meals. This helps stack up the marketing. This is why bigger films tend to have an advantage. It's kind of very well-known, logic in Hollywood that as films get stronger, as the properties get bigger, they have an easier road of it in terms of the marketing. And obviously not the spend and not the actor cost and all the rest. But anyway, that's one flaw. The second is that movies, you can't judge them on domestic or even global box office alone, particularly now. You go back in time like 30, 40 years ago, that was a safer bet. But today you do have a lot of other sources of income. You have the money that people pay to put the film on their streaming channels. You have, yes, physical media, Blu-ray, and that kind of stuff actually is substantial. It's shocking. It's still hanging in there. You have people paying for the movie to get it on digital. You have companies paying for it to be played on airplanes and in hotels and things like that. It all adds up. In some cases, quite a bit. And a film like Indiana Jones is one that absolutely is going to do better than others, particularly with these places where companies have to kind of pre-buy. Now, you might go, well, wait a minute, the reviews are terrible. It looks like the film is going to bomb. It may, and the reviews certainly may be terrible, but that doesn't mean that every airline that flies around is not going to get Indiana Jones 5. It's a marquee name. It's one that can sell. I'll put it to you this way. They went all in on this super dumbass movie called Moonfall, which was one of the dumbest films ever. Horrible reviews. And I mean, it was a fucking awful movie. And you saw that go because it was an easy premise. It was a kind of a popcorn type film. Indiana Jones is going to do really well in places like that. Maybe not flights to Germany, but other places for sure. But anyway, if the movie topped, 300, 350. By the way, the other argument out there is that Disney is actually spending like $600 million. They're just lying completely about it. Now, make no mistake about it. They could be hiding some of the funds for sure. But, when you're a public company, you can't hide that many funds. You can hide 25, 50 million, but there becomes a reporting issue, gets people in jail, and there's no reason for them to hide. Anyway, so what else can we do here? If Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, to go back for a moment, was made on a $185 million budget, reportedly. It also spent, reportedly, $80 million on marketing. Now, $80 million is a lot less than, 185, which is what that original article told you it would spend. But again, lots of people were going in to make toys and posters and tie-ins and all the rest. We're seeing the same thing happening here. If Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny ends at around 350 all in, then if you're doing kind of the math based on the other films, it needs to make about $700 million, about $750 million to break even. 750 to break even. Again, that's using a fairly exaggerated marketing amount that is unlikely to be needed. Now, when I say unlikely to be needed, again, I'm not saying that the film doesn't need to be marketed. If it's got bad word of mouth, they're going to need to throw more money into marketing. Sure, they may need to do that. But a lot of people are going to be contributing to that marketing, not just Disney. All the licensors are going to be contributing to it. So that bill is not all going to come on Disney. But let's say it has to make about 700, 750 in that realm. Okay? Well, first of all, it's a lot less than $1 billion. It right now the projections, very very early projections, are that it's going to make about about 840 global is what Hollywood's kind of projecting this film will make. So that's profitable. Now, it's also a disappointment. And this is the part where people sometimes mix the two together. If the film is profitable versus if the film is they like the profit that it makes, that it's considered a success. If it's only giving a return on about 750 to 850, it's got a $100 million return. For a film like Indie, that's not going to be considered a success. It's not necessarily going to be considered a failure, but it's going to be considered kind of a, somewhat waste of time. And all eyes are going to turn toward the aftermarket. Now, one of the other pieces that, comes from a film like Indie is, you get value in having another film in that franchise. So Disney gets to sell more full-on merch for years. They get to do things in their park and Hollywood studios. They get to sell box sets where they've got all the Indiana Jones films plus a bunch of other shit in there. There's value in adding to the franchise, as the Fast and the Furious is currently showing everyone. There's value to that. And they have milked that value out of Star Wars for a long time. So, it's probably worth making this movie, even if it's depressing and awful, and even if the domestic box office, let's say it does really terribly, and it comes in at 650. So comes in lower than what the projected break even would need to be. It's going to still likely do well for Disney long term because of all these other pieces, because of all this other stuff. Now, nobody wants that outcome. The reality is they want to have the movie, and generally when you're doing sequels, and this frankly is in some ways a better metric than the how much does it need to break even. It's called, and you could do this with sequels. How much money does it need to make as much or more profit as the previous film? Because films are supposed to grow over time. So if Indy 5 is going to make the same percentage of profit, basically show that the franchise has strength, that it's not fading, that it's ending on a high note, then it would need to make $1.1 billion worldwide. So worldwide, it would need to make that money if it wants to make the same profit as the last one. And frankly, this is the number that I think a lot of people are tossing around when they say it needs to make $1 billion, $1.2 billion. It's not to break even. It's to be considered a success in the same area as those other films. So, as you go out and you hear the conversation, it's got to make, first of all, that 3x, production in order to break even is absurd. That's absurd nonsense math. And anyone who tells you that is out of their minds. That's just wrong, flat wrong. Second, understand, and particularly now, and all of us have seen it, we're living in a world where, the movie theater box office has to be supplanted by digital revenue, by home streaming, by all this other stuff. The world is not the same. And so therefore, the cost and the profit is not the same. Those things need to come from other sources. So if you're going to do these assessments, you're going to take a hard box office only stance at things, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a bit like saying, if you're going to win a race, you have to use it with a car that is built by 1950 standards. As the world has shifted, there's a lot of new technology out there. It's not the same. Therefore, how you get to that math is not the same. But the most important thing to take away is, generally, when it's a franchise, when it's a sequel like this one, you need to make more than the previous one. That's the golden rule. And so if we're going by that number, then yes, Indiana Jones needs to make about $1.15 billion in order to meet that goal. And that's what it's ultimately going to be judged on. I think it's very safe to say it's going to make the 750, the 860 they're projecting. I think it's very safe to say it's going to make that. It will play decently well overseas. Now, I say that, who knows? The people are pointing out that there's a gay character in there, and that's going to cause China to not take it. Maybe. China seems to like Westerns right now, and even though Indiana Jones is not one, a guy running around with adventures and a fedora hat, I don't know. We'll see. But We'll see how it all works out. But I think it's safe to say it's going to make that realm of money. I think it's going to be marketed. Disney's going to put a lot of muscle behind it. They're going to do it. So it could be a box office failure. Maybe it will, but I project it will get there. Will it get to 1.2? I don't know. I think that's really tough. Just the summer box office is crowded this year. I think it's going to be hard to get there. But anyway, we'll see. And that's basically it. So I hope that was helpful. I gave you a little bit of data. I'm seeing again a lot of just wild information flying around out there. Anytime Kathleen Kennedy's going to be on a movie, I think you're going to get this kind of approach. But that's the take. Thanks for listening.